I used to believe that blended families meant second chances, that stepsisters were supposed to become your closest allies, and fathers were supposed to protect all their children equally, not cover up when one daughter tries to murder the other. But when the lifeguard who witnessed my accident called me 2 months later to tell me he'd seen everything, including my stepsister holding me underwater until I nearly died, I realized Savannah had tried to drown me, and my father had spent weeks lying to everyone, including the police, about what really happened in our backyard pool. My name is Harper Caldwell, and this is the story of how the people I trusted most in my new family nearly got away with attempted murder disguised as a swimming accident. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in the coastal town of Sunset Bay, California, I learned that family could be rebuilt just as beautifully as the Victorian houses that lined our historic district. My mother had died in a car accident when I was 12, leaving my father Gregory and me to navigate grief and loss together for 4 long years. When Dad met Vanessa Reed at a charity fundraiser when I was 16, I was genuinely happy to see him smile again for the first time since Mom's death. Vanessa seemed perfect for him, a successful interior designer with her own firm, a warm laugh that filled our too-quiet house, and most importantly, a genuine interest in becoming part of our small, broken family. She had a daughter from her previous marriage, Savannah, who was 6 months younger than me and seemed eager to have an older sister figure in her life. "This is going to be wonderful," Vanessa said the first time she brought Savannah to our house for dinner. "The girls are so close in age, and Harper has such a nurturing personality. I think they're going to be inseparable." At first, that prediction seemed accurate. Savannah was charming, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable beneath her confident exterior. She'd been through her own trauma. Her father had abandoned the family when she was 10, leaving Vanessa to rebuild their lives alone. We bonded over being daughters who'd lost parents, over the awkwardness of watching our surviving parents navigate new love, over the hope that maybe we could create something better together than what we'd lost individually. When our parents married in a small beachside ceremony the summer before my senior year, I was genuinely excited to officially become Savannah's sister. I helped her pick out her maid of honor dress, spent hours helping her practice the speech she'd written about family and second chances, and looked forward to starting senior year with a built-in best friend. But once the wedding rings were on and Vanessa and Savannah officially moved into our house, the dynamic began to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Our house was a sprawling craftsman bungalow that had been in the Caldwell family for 3 generations, complete with a large backyard pool that my grandfather had installed in the 1960s. It was the kind of house that looked perfect in real estate magazines: hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and enough space for a family of 6. But it had been designed for a traditional nuclear family, not for blending 2 families with different histories, expectations, and coping mechanisms. The first sign of trouble was how quickly the house began revolving around Savannah's needs and preferences. She was allergic to the lavender that my mother had planted throughout the garden, so those had to be removed. She needed absolute quiet to study, so my piano practice had to be moved to the garage. She was sensitive to certain cleaning products, so we switched to an expensive organic line that had to be special ordered. None of these requests seemed unreasonable individually. Vanessa presented them as normal adjustments that any blended family would need to make, and Dad was so grateful for his new wife's presence in our lives that he agreed to everything without question. But collectively, they created a pattern where my comfort, my routines, and my connection to the house I'd grown up in became secondary to accommodating Savannah's sensitivities. The more concerning pattern was how Savannah began positioning herself as the victim in any conflict or comparison between us. When we both auditioned for the lead in our high school's production of West Side Story, and I got the part of Maria while she was cast in a supporting role, she spent the entire rehearsal period telling anyone who would listen how unfair the casting had been.
Harper has more experience because her mom used to take her to theater camps every summer, she'd say with tears in her eyes. I never got opportunities like that because my family couldn't afford it. The fact that I'd worked summers at a local cafe to pay for those theater camps myself, and that her mother made significantly more money than my father ever had, didn't seem relevant to the narrative she was constructing. When we both applied to USC for college, I for their business program, she for communications, and I received a partial scholarship while her application was rejected, she had a complete breakdown that lasted for weeks. It's not fair, she sobbed to our parents one evening while I was supposedly doing homework upstairs. Harper gets everything handed to her because she's the perfect daughter. I'll never be able to compete with someone whose mother died tragically. Everyone always feels sorry for her.
Harper, sweetheart, Dad said to me privately the next day. I know you're excited about USC, but maybe you could be a little more sensitive about celebrating your achievements around Savannah. She's been through a lot, and she's struggling with feeling like she doesn't measure up to your accomplishments. I haven't been celebrating anything, I said, confused. I've barely mentioned USC at all because I didn't want to make her feel bad. I know you don't mean to, but sometimes your success can feel overwhelming to people who are still finding their path. Vanessa thinks it might help if you could find ways to include Savannah more. Maybe help her see that you're a team rather than competitors. The suggestion that I was somehow responsible for managing Savannah's emotional reactions to my accomplishments was my first real indication that this blended family wasn't going to work the way I'd hoped. But I was 17, excited about college, and desperate to maintain the peace that had finally returned to our house after years of grief. So I tried harder to be the perfect stepsister. I helped Savannah with her college applications for the following year, spending hours editing her essays and helping her research schools that might be a better fit for her interests and academic record. I gave her my car on weekends when she wanted to go out with friends. I even turned down invitations to parties and social events when she seemed to be feeling left out or struggling with depression. None of it was enough. The more accommodating I became, the more Savannah seemed to resent my existence. She'd make cutting comments about my perfect life and my tragic backstory that made adults want to help me. She'd accidentally break or lose things that belonged to me, then act hurt when I got upset about it. Most poisonously, she began spreading subtle rumors at school about how I manipulated situations to make myself look like the victim while making her life difficult at home. Harper acts all sweet and innocent, I overheard her telling a group of mutual friends at lunch one day. But she's actually really manipulative. She uses her dead mom as an excuse to get out of trouble and make everyone feel sorry for her. It's honestly kind of gross. By the spring of my senior year, I was counting down the days until I could leave for college and escape the toxic dynamic that our household had become. But Savannah had other plans. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came in May during what should have been one of the happiest times of my life. I'd just received confirmation that my scholarship had been increased for the following year, meaning I could afford the full USC experience without burdening Dad financially. I was excited to share the news at dinner, thinking that maybe this piece of good fortune could finally bridge the gap between Savannah and me. Instead, the announcement triggered the worst fight our blended family had ever experienced. Of course Harper gets more money, Savannah said, her voice dripping with resentment. Everything always works out perfectly for her. Some of us have to actually struggle for things. Savannah, Vanessa said gently, Harper worked very hard for this scholarship. We should be celebrating her success. Should we? Savannah snapped, turning to look directly at me with undisguised hatred. Or should we acknowledge that Harper gets special treatment because everyone feels sorry for the girl whose mommy died? I'm so sick of pretending that she's not the golden child in this family just because she has a tragic backstory. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Dad and Vanessa looking at each other, trying to figure out how to handle their daughter's public breakdown. But what stunned me was that no one immediately defended me or called out how inappropriate her comments were. Savannah, that's enough,
Dad said finally, but his voice lacked the firm disapproval I'd expected. We don't talk about each other that way in this family. Don't we? Because I'm pretty sure Harper talks about me behind my back all the time. I'm pretty sure she thinks she's better than me because her grades are higher and her college prospects are better, and everyone thinks she's so mature and responsible. That's not true, I said quietly, but Savannah was just getting started. Isn't it? Then why do you spend so much time making me look bad? Why do you always have to be perfect at everything so that the rest of us don't have to live in your shadow? The venom in her voice was unlike anything I had ever heard from her before. This wasn't sibling rivalry or teenage jealousy. This was genuine hatred, the kind that made me suddenly afraid of what she might be capable of. Harper has never tried to make you look bad, Dad said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. She's been nothing but supportive of you since our families joined together. Supportive? Savannah laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when someone pretends to help you while secretly hoping you'll fail? Harper doesn't want me to succeed. She wants to be the only successful daughter in this family. She wants to keep being the tragic princess who everyone feels sorry for.
"That's enough," Dad shouted, his voice finally carrying the authority I'd been waiting for. "Both of you, go to your rooms. This conversation is over." But as I walked upstairs, I could hear Savannah continuing to argue with our parents, her voice carrying clearly through the house. "You don't understand what it's like," she was saying, crying now in a way that sounded calculated rather than genuine. "Harper gets everything she wants, and I have to watch everyone praise her for being so strong and mature while I'm treated like I'm just the broken stepdaughter who can't measure up. I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I'm being psychologically tortured in my own home." Psychological torture. That's how she described living with someone who had bent over backwards to accommodate her needs and support her goals for 2 solid years. I lay in bed that night thinking about Savannah's words, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. I replayed every interaction we'd had, every time I'd helped her with homework or given up something I wanted so she could have it instead. I couldn't find a single instance where I deliberately tried to make her look bad or feel inferior. But I was beginning to understand that the problem wasn't anything I had or hadn't done. The problem was that Savannah needed me to be the villain in her story, the obstacle preventing her from getting the love and success she felt entitled to. And if I wasn't naturally villainous enough, she was perfectly willing to rewrite reality until I fit the role she needed me to play. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in late May, when the California heat was making everyone restless and irritable. Dad and Vanessa had gone to look at potential venues for Savannah's graduation party, leaving us alone in the house for the first time since our dinner fight. I was floating on a pool raft, trying to study for my final exams while getting some sun, when Savannah came outside in her bikini, looking like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot. She'd always been stunning, tall, blonde, perfectly proportioned in ways that made older men turn around to stare. But today there was something different about her energy, something predatory. "Harper, we need to talk," she said, sitting down on the edge of the pool and dangling her feet in the water. "I'm trying to study," I said, without looking up from my textbook. "Can it wait?" "No, it can't wait. We're going to be living in this house together for 3 more months, and I can't take the tension anymore. We need to figure out how to coexist." Something in her tone made me look up. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was something cold and calculating in her expression that made me suddenly very aware that we were alone. "Okay," I said carefully, closing my textbook. "What do you want to talk about?" "I want to apologize," she said, slipping into the pool and swimming closer to my raft. "I know I've been difficult to live with. I know I've been jealous of your relationship with Dad and your success at school. I want to start over." The apology felt wrong somehow, too practiced and strategic. But I was desperate for peace in our household, and the water was warm and relaxing in a way that made me want to believe her. I'd like that too, Savannah. I never wanted us to be enemies. I really did want us to be sisters. I know, and maybe we still can be. But first, I need you to understand something. What's that? She reached out and grabbed the side of my raft, ostensibly to steady herself in the water, but there was something about the way she was positioning herself, blocking my path to the pool steps, cornering me in the deep end, that made my survival instincts suddenly kick in. I need you to understand that you're not the only one who can get what she wants in this family, she said, her voice taking on that same cold edge I'd heard at dinner weeks earlier. Savannah, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you think you're so much better than me, so much smarter, so much more deserving, so much more loved. But you're not, Harper. You're just a girl whose mommy died and everyone feels sorry for you. That's not the same thing as actually being special. The venom in her voice was breathtaking, but what scared me more was how deliberately she seemed to be maneuvering us deeper into the pool, away from the shallow end where I could easily stand up. I think I should get out of the pool, I said, trying to paddle my raft toward the steps. But Savannah's grip on the side of the raft prevented me from moving. No, I don't think you should, she said, her smile becoming genuinely terrifying. I think you should stay right here and listen to what I have to say. Savannah, you're scaring me. Good. Maybe it's time someone scared you. Maybe it's time you learned that you're not untouchable just because Daddy loves his precious little orphan girl. That's when she flipped the raft. I went under immediately, weighed down by the heavy textbook I'd been holding and disoriented by the sudden submersion. But instead of surfacing quickly like I normally would have, I felt hands on my shoulders, pushing me down, holding me under the water with surprising strength. I thrashed, trying to break free, but Savannah was a competitive swimmer who had been on the varsity team for 3 years. She knew exactly how to position herself to keep me submerged while making it look like we were just playing around if anyone happened to see us from a distance. The water burned my lungs as I fought to surface, but every time I got close to breaking through, she'd push me down again. I could see her face above me through the chlorinated water, distorted but clearly focused and intentional. This wasn't an accident or a moment of anger. This was deliberate, attempted murder. I don't know how long she held me under. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a minute or two before I started to lose consciousness. The edges of my vision went dark, and I could feel my body giving up the fight to reach the surface. That's when I heard the whistle. The sound was sharp and authoritative, cutting through the water and Savannah's concentration. Suddenly, the hands holding me down were gone, and I shot to the surface, gasping and choking, barely able to stay afloat. "Hey, everything okay over there?" A male voice called from the fence that separated our backyard from the neighbor's property. I turned toward the voice, still coughing up pool water, and saw Jake Martinez, the college student who worked as a lifeguard at the community pool and lived next door during the summers. He was standing on a ladder, apparently having been cleaning gutters on his parents' house, and had a clear view into our backyard. "We're fine," Savannah called back, immediately switching to her charming social persona. "Just sisters playing around in the pool." But Jake was looking directly at me, and I could see concern in his expression as he took in my obvious distress. "Harper, you okay?" he asked, clearly not buying Savannah's explanation. I wanted to scream, to tell him exactly what had just happened, to beg him to call the police. But Savannah was floating right next to me, and I could feel her watching every word I was about to say. "I'm okay," I managed to croak, still struggling to catch my breath. "Just went under for a second." "You sure? You look pretty shaken up." "She's fine,"
Savannah said firmly. "She's just not as strong a swimmer as she thinks she is. I was trying to help her when she started panicking." Jake looked between us for a long moment, clearly sensing that something was wrong, but unable to pinpoint exactly what. "Well, maybe you two should take a break from swimming for a while. Harper, you want me to call your parents?" "No," I said quickly, terrified of what Savannah might do if I involved our parents. "I'm fine, really." Jake nodded reluctantly and went back to his gutter cleaning, but I could feel him glancing over at us periodically for the rest of the afternoon. As soon as he was out of earshot, Savannah swam closer to me, her mask of sisterly concern disappearing entirely. "If you ever tell anyone what really happened here today," she whispered, "I'll make sure everyone knows that you're so desperate for attention that you're making up stories about your own stepsister trying to hurt you. Who do you think they'll believe? The girl with the dead mother who's always playing victim, or the sweet stepsister who was just trying to help during a swimming accident?" I stared at her, this person who looked like a normal teenager but had just tried to murder me in our own backyard. "Savannah, why? Why would you want to hurt me?" "Because I'm tired of living in your shadow," she said simply. "I'm tired of watching everyone love you more than they love me. I'm tired of pretending that having a tragic backstory makes you special, instead of just pathetic. You could have killed me. That was the idea. But apparently you're harder to drown than I thought." She walked into the house, leaving me alone in the pool with the terrifying realization that my stepsister had just attempted murder and was already planning how to frame me as a liar if I tried to tell anyone the truth. When Dad and Vanessa came home an hour later, they found me sitting by the pool, in dry clothes, reading a book and acting like nothing had happened. Savannah had apparently spent the intervening time crafting her version of events because she immediately launched into a concerned explanation of my swimming accident. "Dad, I'm so glad you're home," she said with tears in her eyes. "Harper had a really scary moment in the pool earlier. She was on that inflatable raft and somehow fell off in the deep end, and I think she panicked because she went under for a while. I had to help pull her to the surface." "What?" Dad looked at me with immediate concern. "Harper, are you okay? Do we need to take you to a doctor?" "I'm fine," I said quietly, unable to look at Savannah. "It was just an accident." "Are you sure? Savannah said you were underwater for quite a while." "I'm sure." But I wasn't sure about anything anymore. I wasn't sure I was safe in my own home. I wasn't sure I could trust the people who were supposed to protect me. And I wasn't sure I could survive 3 more months living with someone who had just attempted to kill me and was already rewriting the story to make herself the hero. That night, lying in bed and replaying every terrifying moment of what had happened in the pool, I realized that Joke Martinez might be the only person who could tell anyone what he'd really seen that afternoon. If he'd seen anything at all. If he'd believed what his eyes were telling him instead of Savannah's explanation. And if he'd be willing to get involved in what most people would dismiss as a family drama rather than an attempted murder. Those were a lot of ifs to hang my survival on, but they were the only hope I had.
2 weeks after Savannah tried to drown me, I couldn't sleep through the night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt those hands pushing me under the chlorinated water, holding me down with deliberate, calculated pressure until my lungs burned and my vision started to fade. But what haunted me more than the physical memory of drowning was the terrifying certainty that it would happen again. Savannah had made it clear that my survival was a disappointment, not a relief. In the days following the attack, she'd been playing the role of concerned stepsister perfectly, asking about my recovery from the swimming accident, and suggesting to our parents that maybe I should take swimming lessons to build my confidence in the water. Harper's always been a little anxious about deep water, she told Dad over breakfast one morning, her voice full of sisterly concern. Maybe now that she's had a scary experience, we should get her some professional help so she doesn't develop a real phobia. I listened to her rewrite the attempted murder as a service she was providing me and realized that Savannah wasn't just dangerous, she was methodical. She was already laying the groundwork for the next attempt, creating a narrative where my fear of swimming would be seen as psychological weakness rather than rational terror of someone who had tried to kill me. But what disturbed me most was how readily our parents accepted her version of events. "That's very thoughtful of you, Savannah," Vanessa said, smiling at her daughter with obvious pride. "You're being such a caring sister to Harper." "Family takes care of family," Savannah replied, looking directly at me with eyes that promised this conversation was far from over. I spent those 2 weeks trying to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe the drowning really had been some kind of accident or momentary lapse in judgment that Savannah regretted. But every interaction we had confirmed that nothing had changed except her confidence in her ability to hurt me without consequences. She'd accidentally lock the bathroom door when she knew I was waiting to use it, then take 45-minute showers while I stood in the hallway getting increasingly anxious about being late for school. She'd volunteer to do laundry and then forget to wash my clothes, leaving me scrambling to find clean outfits for important events. Most chilling, she'd taken to swimming laps in our pool every evening, making sure I could see her from my bedroom window as she'd demonstrated her strength and comfort in the water that had nearly been my grave. "Harper, you should come swimming with me," she'd call out sweetly when she knew our parents were within earshot. "The water's perfect, and you need to get back in there so you don't develop a fear." Each invitation felt like a threat, disguised as sisterly encouragement. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon when I was walking home from school and saw Jake Martinez working in his family's front yard. I'd been avoiding him since the incident, terrified that talking to him would somehow make Savannah's threats become reality. But seeing him there, remembering how his whistle had literally saved my life, I realized that Jake might be my only chance at getting someone to believe what really happened in that pool. I approached him carefully, my heart pounding as I tried to figure out how to start a conversation about attempted murder without sounding crazy. "Hey, Jake," I said, stopping at the fence between our properties. "Hey, Harper, how's it going?" He looked up from the hedge he was trimming, and I could see immediate concern in his expression as he took in my appearance. I'd lost weight over the past 2 weeks, was having trouble sleeping, and probably looked as traumatized as I felt. "I'm okay," I said automatically, then stopped myself. "Actually, no, I'm not okay. I wanted to ask you about what you saw that day in our pool when you were cleaning gutters." Jake set down his hedge trimmers and gave me my full attention. "What about it? What exactly did you see before you blew the whistle?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to decide how much truth I could handle. "Why are you asking, Harper?" "Because I need to know if someone else saw what I think happened." "What do you think happened?" I took a deep breath, knowing that once I said the words out loud, there would be no going back. "I think Savannah tried to drown me. I think she held me underwater on purpose until you interrupted her." Jake's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes, a recognition that confirmed my worst fears and my desperate hopes at the same time. "How long were you underwater?" he asked quietly. "I don't know exactly. Long enough that I started to lose consciousness, long enough that I thought I was going to die. And Savannah was holding me down. Every time I tried to surface, she pushed me back under. She's a strong swimmer, and she knew exactly how to position herself to keep me submerged." Jake nodded slowly, like pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. "I was up on the ladder when I heard splashing that sounded wrong, not like normal pool play. When I looked over, I could see 2 people in the water, but it looked like one person was struggling while the other was controlling the situation." My hand started shaking with relief. Someone had seen. Someone else knew that what happened wasn't an accident. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because when I called out, your stepsister immediately said you were fine and that you just panicked while swimming, and you confirmed her story. I figured if there had been a real problem, you would have asked for help."
I was terrified she'd hurt me worse if I told anyone the truth.
Jake was quiet for another long moment, processing what I'd told him. Harper, if what you're saying is true, if your stepsister really tried to drown you, you need to call the police. Who's going to believe me? She's already told everyone that I had a swimming accident, and she helped rescue me. My parents think she's a hero for pulling me out of the water. I'll tell them what I saw. The offer was so simple, so straightforward, that it took me a moment to process what he was saying. Jake Martinez, who barely knew me beyond casual neighbor interactions, was willing to get involved in a family situation that most people would run from. Are you sure? This could get really complicated. Savannah isn't going to admit what she did, and my parents are completely on her side. Harper, I watched someone try to kill you. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen just because it's complicated. That evening, I sat in my bedroom trying to work up the courage to confront my family with Jake's offer to testify about what he'd witnessed. I knew that once I accused Savannah of attempted murder, there would be no going back to the pretense of being a normal blended family. But I also knew that I couldn't survive another attack, and Savannah's increasing boldness suggested that she was already planning her next attempt. I found them in the living room after dinner, Dad reading real estate contracts, while Vanessa worked on interior design plans, and Savannah scrolled through her phone. It looked like a peaceful family scene, the kind that would make perfect social media posts about blended family happiness. I need to talk to all of you about what happened in the pool 2 weeks ago, I said, standing in the doorway because I was too nervous to sit down. Dad looked up from his paperwork. Harper, sweetheart, you don't need to keep reliving that accident. Savannah handled the situation perfectly, and you're fine now. It wasn't an accident, I said, watching their faces carefully. Savannah tried to drown me. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa's pen stopped moving across her design plans, Dad's mouth fell open slightly, and Savannah looked up from her phone with an expression of such convincing shock and hurt that for a moment I almost doubted my own memories. Harper, that's a terrible thing to say, Vanessa said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Savannah saved your life that day. No, she didn't. She held me underwater until I almost died. The only reason I survived is because Jake Martinez saw what was happening and interrupted her. That's impossible, Dad said, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. Savannah would never hurt you. You're sisters. Are we? I looked directly at Savannah, who was now crying in a way that looked completely genuine. Because sisters don't usually try to murder each other over college scholarships. Savannah stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you would say that about me. I jumped in the water to help you when you started drowning, and now you're accusing me of trying to kill me? Why would you want to hurt me like this? Because you held me underwater for over a minute while I fought to breathe. I was trying to help you. You were panicking and thrashing around, and I was trying to calm you down so I could get you to the shallow end safely. Then why didn't Jake see it that way? Why did he think something was wrong enough to blow his whistle and call out to us? Because you were panicking. Of course it looked scary from a distance, but I was the one in the water with you, trying to save your life. Vanessa moved to put a protective arm around her daughter. Harper, I think you're confused about what happened. Trauma can affect memory, especially when you were in a frightening situation. I'm not confused, and Jake Martinez saw the whole thing. He's willing to tell you exactly what he witnessed if you want to ask him. Jake Martinez wasn't in the pool with you, Dad said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when he considered a conversation over. He was looking at the situation from a distance, without context. Savannah was the one who was actually there, who actually saved your life. She didn't save my life. She tried to end it. Stop, Vanessa said sharply. This is exactly the kind of drama I was afraid might happen when our families blended. Harper,
I understand that you're used to being the center of attention in this household, but that doesn't give you the right to make false accusations against Savannah just because she was getting praise for helping you. I stared at her, shocked by how quickly she'd turned my survival into a jealousy issue about attention-seeking behavior. This isn't about attention, I said desperately. This is about the fact that Savannah tried to kill me, and all of you are more concerned with protecting her than finding out the truth. The truth is that your stepsister risked her own safety to help you during a swimming accident. The truth is that you're making serious accusations without any proof except your own confused memories and the observations of a neighbor who wasn't even in the pool. Jake saw her holding me underwater. Jake saw what looked like a rescue situation, because that's what it was. I'm trained in water safety, Harper. I know how to help someone who's drowning without putting both of us at risk. The lies were so smooth, so believable, that I almost started to doubt what I remembered. But then I looked at Savannah's eyes, and for just a split second, I saw the same cold calculation I'd seen in the pool before she flipped my raft.
"You held me down," I said quietly. "You looked me in the eyes while you pushed me underwater, and you held me there until I almost died." "I held you steady while I tried to help you," she corrected. "You were thrashing so much that you were making the situation more dangerous for both of us." "Ask Jake what he saw," I said, turning to my father. "Call him over here right now and ask him to describe exactly what he witnessed." Dad and Vanessa looked at each other, having one of those wordless conversations that married couples master. I could see them trying to figure out how to handle the situation without escalating it further. "Harper," Dad said finally, "even if we talked to Jake, even if his version of events was different from Savannah's, that doesn't mean anyone tried to hurt you. It just means that rescue situations can look confusing from the outside." "So you're not going to ask him?" "We're not going to drag the neighbors into a family misunderstanding," Vanessa said firmly, "and we're not going to continue entertaining accusations that are clearly coming from trauma and confusion rather than actual facts." I looked around the living room at these three people who were supposed to be my family, who were supposed to protect me and believe me and seek justice when someone tried to hurt me. Instead, they were united in protecting my attacker and treating me like I was the problem. "What if it happens again?" I asked quietly. "What if what happens again?" Dad asked. "What if she tries to kill me again?" "Harper," Vanessa said, her voice taking on the patronizing tone adults use with children who are being unreasonable. "No one tried to kill you. You had a frightening experience in the pool, and your mind is trying to make sense of it by creating a narrative where someone was deliberately hurting you. But that's not what happened." "Then you won't mind if I stay out of the pool from now on?" "Of course not," Dad said. "If swimming makes you anxious now, you don't have to swim, but I don't want you treating Savannah like she's dangerous when she's the reason you're alive." I realized in that moment that my family had made their choice. They were going to believe Savannah's version of events regardless of what evidence I presented or what witnesses came forward. They were going to protect her from consequences and treat me like I was mentally unstable for refusing to be grateful to my attempted murderer. "I'm going to my room," I said, heading for the stairs. "Harper," Savannah called after me, her voice full of sisterly concern, "I really hope you can work through whatever you're going through. I hate that you think I would ever want to hurt you." I turned back to look at her one last time, and she gave me a smile that our parents couldn't see, the same smile she'd worn in the pool right before she tried to kill me. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of Savannah swimming laps in the pool below my window. Each splash felt like a reminder that she was stronger than me, more comfortable in the water, and completely confident that she could hurt me again without facing any consequences. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "This is Jake Martinez. Got your number from the school directory. Are you okay? Your family seemed pretty upset when I saw them in the backyard earlier." I
I stared at the message, realizing that Jake must have seen or heard some part of our confrontation. He was reaching out, checking on me, offering support that no one in my own family was willing to provide. I typed back, "They don't believe me about what happened in the pool." His response came quickly. "Do you want me to talk to them? Tell them what I saw?" I thought about it for a long moment, imagining how my family would react to Jake contradicting their chosen narrative. They'd probably accuse him of misunderstanding the situation or being manipulated by my false accusations or seeking attention by getting involved in neighborhood drama. But they'd also have to acknowledge that someone else had witnessed what happened in that pool, someone who had no reason to lie, no stake in our family dynamics, and no motivation to cause trouble unless he genuinely believed a crime had been committed. "Yes," I typed back. "I think you need to tell them exactly what you saw. I'll come over tomorrow after school. And Harper, what I saw wasn't an accident. I'm sorry no one believed you, but I believe you." For the first time in 2 weeks, I fell asleep without replaying the feeling of drowning. Because tomorrow, someone was going to tell the truth about what Savannah had done to me. And maybe, finally, my family would have to listen. The next afternoon, I watched from my bedroom window as Jake Martinez walked up our front driveway looking determined but nervous. He was carrying a small notebook, and I could see him taking deep breaths like he was preparing for something difficult. I'd spent the entire day at school unable to concentrate, knowing that this conversation would either finally give me the support I needed or prove definitively that no one would ever believe me about what Savannah had done to me. When the doorbell rang, I heard Dad answer it with the polite but slightly confused tone he used for unexpected visitors. "Jake, good to see you. Is everything okay?" "Hi, Mr. Caldwell. I was hoping I could talk to you and your family about what I saw in your backyard pool a couple weeks ago. Harper asked me to come over and share what I witnessed." The silence that followed was long enough that I knew Dad was processing the implications of Jake's request. Finally, I heard him invite Jake inside, followed by the sound of voices in the living room as he called for Vanessa and Savannah to join them. I stayed upstairs for the first few minutes, giving Jake a chance to speak without me in the room. I wanted my family to hear his account without being able to claim that I'd influenced or coached his testimony. "I was cleaning gutters on our house that Saturday afternoon," I heard Jake say, his voice carrying clearly up the stairs. "I had a clear view of your pool area from the ladder I was using. I saw Harper on an inflatable raft, and then I saw Savannah get in the water and swim toward her." "Right," Dad said. "Savannah told us she was trying to be social, maybe convince Harper to swim with her instead of just floating around studying." "That's not what I saw," Jake said firmly. "What I saw was Savannah deliberately flip Harper's raft, sending her into the water. And then, when Harper tried to surface, I watched Savannah push her back down and hold her underwater." The silence that followed was even longer than the first one. "That's impossible," Vanessa said finally. "Savannah was helping Harper during a swimming accident. Harper panicked and started thrashing around, and Savannah had to restrain her to prevent them both from drowning." "Ma'am, with respect, I know the difference between a rescue and an attack. I've been a certified lifeguard for 3 years. What I witnessed was not someone helping a drowning person. It was someone deliberately holding another person underwater." I crept halfway down the stairs, positioning myself where I could hear everything but remain out of sight. "How long?" Dad asked quietly. "How long what?" How long was Harper underwater? Jake was quiet for a moment, and I could picture him consulting the notes he'd brought. "At least 90 seconds, probably closer to 2 minutes. Long enough that when I blew my whistle and called out, Harper surfaced, gasping and choking like someone who'd nearly drowned." But Savannah immediately explained what had happened. She said Harper had panicked while swimming and that she'd helped pull her to safety. "And Harper confirmed that story when I asked if she was okay," Jake said. "But Mr. Caldwell, I could see that Harper was terrified, not just of the water. She was terrified of Savannah. She kept looking at her stepsister like she was afraid of what might happen if she said the wrong thing." "That's ridiculous," Savannah's voice cut in, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Harper wasn't afraid of me. She was embarrassed that she'd needed help swimming and didn't want to admit it in front of a neighbor." Miss, I'm sorry, but that's not what I saw. What I saw was someone who had just survived an attack trying to figure out how to stay safe. This is insane, Vanessa said, her voice rising with anger. You're describing my daughter like she's some kind of predator. Savannah saved Harper's life that day. She risked her own safety to help someone who was drowning. Then why did I feel the need to intervene? Jake asked. Why did something about the situation look wrong enough that I stopped what I was doing and called out to check on them? Because rescue situations can look chaotic from a distance, Dad said, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. That doesn't mean anyone was trying to hurt anyone else. Mr. Caldwell, I've seen hundreds of water rescues. I know what they look like. This wasn't a rescue. This was an attempted drowning that I interrupted by making my presence known. I heard movement in the living room, and then Savannah's voice, closer to where I was hiding on the stairs. Harper, I know you're listening. Come down here and tell Jake that he misunderstood what he saw. I took a deep breath and walked down the remaining stairs into the living room. Jake was sitting on the edge of our couch, looking uncomfortable but determined. Dad and Vanessa were standing near the fireplace, their arms crossed defensively. And Savannah was positioned by the stairs, watching me with eyes that promised consequences if I didn't cooperate with her version of events. Jake came to tell us about his observations from that day in the pool, Dad said carefully. He seems to think that Savannah was deliberately trying to hurt you instead of helping you. Because she was, I said quietly, looking directly at Jake. Everything you saw was real. Savannah held me underwater until I thought I was going to die. You saved my life by interrupting her. Jake nodded grimly. That's what I thought I was seeing. I just needed to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting the situation. You were misinterpreting it, Savannah said, tears streaming down her face again. Harper, can you let him say these things about me? I jumped into that pool to save your life, and now you're both making me sound like a monster. Because that's what you are, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my own voice. You tried to kill me, Savannah. Jake saw you do it. And instead of being grateful that someone stopped you, you've spent 2 weeks convincing everyone that you're a hero. I am not a monster, Savannah shouted, her composure finally cracking. I have never tried to hurt you. I have bent over backwards to be a good sister to you, and this is how you repay me? By making up stories about attempted murder? I'm not making anything up. Jake, tell them exactly what you saw.
Jake opened his notebook and read from his notes. At approximately 2:15 p.m. on Saturday, May 18th, I observed Savannah Reed swim toward Harper Caldwell, who was floating on an inflatable raft in the deep end of their pool. Savannah positioned herself next to the raft and deliberately flipped it, causing Harper to fall into the water. When Harper attempted to surface, Savannah placed both hands on Harper's shoulders and pushed her back underwater, holding her in a submerged position for approximately 90 to 120 seconds. Harper was visibly struggling to break free and reached the surface. When I blew my whistle and called out to check on the situation, Savannah immediately released Harper and allowed her to surface. Harper emerged gasping, choking, and appeared to be in respiratory distress consistent with near drowning. The clinical precision of Jake's account seemed to hit my family like a physical blow. Even Savannah stopped crying, apparently shocked that someone had been taking detailed notes about her attempted murder. "You wrote all that down?" Vanessa asked weakly. "I wrote it down that evening because something about the situation bothered me. I've been trained to document incidents that might require follow-up, and what I witnessed looked like an assault, not an accident." "An assault," Dad repeated slowly. "Attempted murder," Jake corrected. "Deliberately holding someone underwater until they nearly drown is attempted murder." "This is completely insane," Savannah said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. "You're talking about me like I'm a killer. I'm 18 years old. I get good grades. I volunteer at the animal shelter. I don't go around trying to murder people." "Then explain what Jake saw," I said. "He saw me trying to help you during a swimming accident. He misinterpreted the situation because he wasn't in the water with us."
I was 20 feet away with an unobstructed view. I could see everything clearly, including your facial expression while you were holding Harper underwater. You looked calm and focused. You looked like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. That detail, Jake's observation of Savannah's expression, seemed to be the breaking point for Dad. I watched his face change as he processed the idea that his stepdaughter had been calm and focused while attempting to drown me. "Savannah," he said quietly, "is there anything you want to tell us about what happened that day?" "I already told you what happened. I saved Harper's life, and now you're all acting like I tried to kill her." "Jake," Dad turned to our neighbor, "would you be willing to give this account to the police?" Savannah went white. "Dad, you can't be serious. You're going to call the police on your own daughter based on the word of some neighbor who doesn't even know us?" "I'm considering calling the police because someone may have tried to kill my daughter, and if that's what happened, then it doesn't matter whose daughter did it." The shift in Dad's perspective was so sudden and dramatic that for a moment I wondered if I was dreaming. For 2 weeks, he'd been dismissing my account and praising Savannah for her heroism. Now he was talking about calling the police on her. "Absolutely," Jake said. "I'll give the statement to anyone who needs to hear it." I should have spoken up sooner, but I assumed that if Harper was in danger, she would ask for help. "She couldn't ask for help," I said, looking at my father. "She threatened me. She said if I told anyone what really happened, she'd make sure everyone knew I was lying for attention because of my tragic backstory." "Your tragic backstory?" Vanessa repeated, her voice hollow. "That's what she called my mom's death, a tragic backstory that I used to manipulate people into feeling sorry for me." Vanessa sank into a chair like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. For the first time since their wedding, she was looking at her daughter with something that might have been doubt. "Savannah, did you really say that to Harper?" I was upset. We'd been fighting about college and scholarships, and I said some things I didn't mean, but that doesn't mean I tried to kill her." "But you did threaten her to keep her from reporting what you'd done," Jake observed. "I didn't do anything." "Then you won't mind if we call the police and let them investigate," Dad said, reaching for his phone. "No!" Savannah screamed, lunging toward Dad to grab the phone from his hand. "You can't call the police. I didn't do anything wrong." The desperation in her voice, the physical attempt to prevent Dad from making the call, was more convincing than any confession could have been. Even Vanessa was staring at her daughter with dawning horror. "Savannah," Vanessa said quietly, "if you didn't do anything wrong, why don't you want the police to investigate?" "Because they'll believe Harper over me. Everyone always believes Harper because she's the perfect daughter with the dead mother who never does anything wrong." "This isn't about me being perfect," I said. "This is about you trying to drown me in our pool. I didn't try to drown you." "Then what were you trying to do when you held me underwater for 2 minutes?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to explain her actions without admitting to attempted murder. "I was trying to scare you," she said, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to know what it felt like to be powerless, to not be in control of everything for once." The admission hit the room like a bomb. Even though I knew exactly what had happened, hearing Savannah confess to deliberately holding me underwater was both vindicating and terrifying. "You tried to scare her by nearly drowning her?" Dad asked, his voice shaking with anger.
I wasn't going to let her actually drown. I just wanted her to understand what it felt like to be scared and helpless, instead of always being so perfect and confident. "Savannah, she could have died," Vanessa said, tears streaming down her face. "If Jape hadn't been there, if he hadn't interrupted you, Harper could have died." "But she didn't die. She was fine. Everyone's acting like I committed murder when all I did was give her a scare." "You held her underwater until she lost consciousness," Jake said flatly. "That's not giving someone a scare. That's attempted murder." "I'm calling the police," Dad said, dialing 911 before anyone could stop him. As we waited for the police to arrive, I found myself studying my family's faces. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Vanessa was crying silently, staring at her daughter like she was seeing a stranger. And Savannah was sitting in the corner, no longer crying or pleading, just looking resigned and angry in equal measure. "Harper," Jake said quietly while we waited, "are you okay?" It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in weeks. No one had checked on my emotional status or wondered how I was processing the trauma of nearly being murdered by my own stepsister. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm relieved that someone finally believes me, but I'm also terrified about what happens next." "What happens next is that you get justice," Dad said firmly. "What happens next is that we make sure you're safe." When the police arrived, they separated all of us for individual interviews. I told my story to Officer Patricia Williams, a middle-aged woman who specialized in domestic violence cases. She listened without interruption, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions that showed she was taking the situation seriously. "Harper, I want you to understand that what you're describing is attempted murder. That's a very serious charge, and it's going to require a thorough investigation." "I understand. Jake Martinez witnessed the whole thing, and he's willing to testify about what he saw." "We'll definitely be interviewing Mr. Martinez, but I also want to prepare you for what this investigation might look like. Your stepsister will probably claim that she was just playing around or trying to help you, and that any danger was accidental. Her attorney will likely argue that teenagers sometimes use poor judgment without intending serious harm. So she might not face any consequences?" "Oh, she'll face consequences. The question is whether those consequences will be criminal charges or something else. That depends on what the evidence shows and how the district attorney decides to proceed." Over the next several weeks, I learned more about criminal investigations than I'd ever wanted to know. Officer Williams interviewed everyone involved, including Jake, whose detailed notes and clear recollection of events proved crucial to building the case. They examined our pool area for any physical evidence and reviewed my medical records from the school nurse, who had noted that I'd seemed unusually anxious and jumpy in the weeks following my swimming accident. The most important development came when the police interviewed Savannah. According to Officer Williams, Savannah had initially stuck to her story about trying to help during a swimming accident, but when confronted with Jake's detailed eyewitness account, she'd eventually admitted to holding Harper underwater longer than necessary because she wanted to teach her a lesson about not being so arrogant. "She's still trying to minimize what she did," Officer Williams explained during one of our follow-up meetings. "She keeps insisting that she never intended to seriously hurt you, but intent can be inferred from actions, and the action of holding someone underwater for 2 minutes demonstrates intent to cause serious harm or death." During the same period, I started seeing Dr. Rebecca Torres, a therapist who specialized in trauma and family violence. Dr. Torres helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just a physical attack, it was a systematic betrayal by people who were supposed to protect me. "Harper, what you're describing is a pattern of psychological abuse that preceded the physical attack. Your stepsister had been conditioning your family to see you as the problem and her as the victim. When you finally stood up for yourself by refusing to let her take credit for your achievements, she escalated to physical violence." "But why didn't my parents see what was happening?" "Because blended families often work very hard to maintain harmony, even if that means overlooking serious problems. Your father and stepmother were so invested in making their marriage work that they were willing to sacrifice your well-being to avoid conflict." Dr. Torres also helped me understand that my survival wasn't just luck. It was the result of Jake Martinez's willingness to pay attention and act when something looked wrong. Most people would have looked away or convinced themselves that they were misinterpreting what they saw. Jake's decision to document what he witnessed and speak up when you asked for help probably saved your life. 6 weeks after my family's confrontation with Jake, Officer Williams called with the news I'd been both hoping for and dreading. "Harper, the district attorney has decided to file charges against your stepsister.
She's being charged with attempted murder in the second degree and aggravated assault. She'll be arrested tomorrow morning. What does that mean for me? It means that you'll probably be asked to testify at trial. It means that your family is going to be under a lot of stress as this case moves through the legal system. And it means that the person who tried to kill you is finally going to face consequences for her actions.
Everyone happy to being someone who demanded justice when crimes were committed against me. I'd learned to trust my own perceptions instead of deferring to other people's versions of reality. Most importantly, I'd learned that seeking help when someone tries to hurt you isn't betrayal, it's survival. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as police officers arrested Savannah in our driveway. She was crying and pleading with them to understand that she'd never meant to hurt me, that she was just a teenager who'd made a mistake. But I felt no sympathy for her tears. She'd had weeks to confess, to take responsibility, to show genuine remorse for what she'd done. Instead, she'd continued lying, enlisted our parents in a campaign to make me doubt my own memories, and only admitted partial truth when confronted with overwhelming evidence. As the police car pulled away with Savannah in the back seat, I realized that I was no longer the victim of her attempted murder. I was the survivor who had found the courage to seek justice, with the help of a neighbor who had refused to look away when something was wrong. And for the first time since that terrifying afternoon in the pool, I felt safe in my own home. The prosecutor's voice was firm, confident, and every word sank deep into me. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this is a case about betrayal. A case where a young girl was attacked not by a stranger, not by an enemy, but by the very person who should have been her sister and protector." She laid it out clearly, the eyewitness testimony, the medical evidence, Savannah's own words. Then Savannah's defense attorney rose. His tone was calm, almost patronizing. "This is not a case of attempted murder. This is a case of teenage horseplay gone too far. Harper misunderstood. Savannah never intended to harm her sister. It was a mistake, nothing more." I clenched my fists under the table. A mistake. Again with that word. But soon it would be my turn to speak. When I looked back, I no longer saw a drowning girl. I saw a survivor. I saw someone who demanded justice instead of silence. Someone who broke the cycle of gaslighting and denial. I learned that family doesn't mean protection. Sometimes it means betrayal. But real family, whether blood or chosen, are the ones who fight for your truth, not against it. And I finally understood survival isn't betrayal. It's courage. The pool no longer haunted me. The memory of water pressing in on me, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears, it would always be part of me, but it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. Because when Savannah tried to take my breath away, I found my voice instead. And now, with every step I take into the future, I carry that voice with me, louder, stronger, unafraid. Justice wasn't just served in court. It was served in me. I am Harper Mitchell. And I am free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.